Okay.
Good afternoon.
Environmental Affairs Officer at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Do you hear me, Dr. Luis?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you please
Can you hear me?
begin your... Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Russia, for inviting me to this workshop on this, to share some ideas, to exchange some ideas on this topic on natural capital, nature, green economy,
and innovation.
And innovation. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Policymakers, state governors, etc., are looking for best ways to, to transition towards green, sustainable development pathways. My name, as you've already indicated, is Luis Lubango. I will just summarize because of time constraint, and I apologize for not being able to speak in the morning because of technical problems that are now solved. My summary will derive from the work of Economic Commission for Africa, ECA. What we normally do, we help African member states, we accompany them in their development planning. The way we do this is through consensus building. So we invite members, head of state, ministers, and senior government officials, and we allow them to discuss, to exchange views, experience, and on key development issues such as climate change, healthcare, technology transfer, disasters, etc. We allow them to build consensus on how to tackle the most pressing issues, such as those I've just highlighted. In addition to that, we do policy research and analysis, which supports that part, that consensus building that informs it. And the third area of our work is direct intervention to member states, where we help countries build the needed capacities, institutional capacity to, to implement their development plans. So the views that I'll share with you derive from those three main areas of work of ECA. First, we all know that we have heard from the 25th, the day before yesterday and today, how Africa's biodiversity and ecosystems, Africa natural capital, these are the stock of living and non-living providing values, how they are under severe threat, how they are they're experiencing a risk, increasing risk, and these are multi-risk, so many risks, it's not just one. And key among those, COVID, of course, is there, but we have climate change, and disasters, natural disasters linked to climate change, and other disasters linked to technological failure, such as marine oil spills, like the one that has hit Mauritius in the recent past. So at the heart, central to this, the mother cause or father to this crisis is sustainable industrialization that has been accompanying, supporting the economic development that we have witnessed over the past few centuries, actually. This economic development has been based on unsustainable or irresponsible production and consumption patterns. They have been using excessively natural resources, energy resources, mainly fossil fuel energies. They've been using also materials extensively, so that the growth that has been produced, measured through GDP, is highly intensive with regards to energy and materials. That is, growth is inefficient with regards to energy and material. Subsequently, as a consequence to that, you had excessive emission of greenhouse gases, release of chemicals and other waste in the environment, in the land and water ecosystems and biodiversities. So, in which they have exerted excessive stress than the one that has been there normally over the past millennia, actually. Of course, this growth has produced some positive outcome. For example, you have improved in service deliveries, improvement in healthcare services, improvement in transportation or mobility, and so forth. But the growth has also failed to close the inequality gap, but also inequality between the North and the South. You have an equal distribution of wealth. The growth has also failed to produce, and this is one of the key perverse effects, it has failed to produce the needed amount of technology and innovations to address those challenges. Subsequently, as a consequence, you have this extreme in climate variability, extreme weather patterns, global warming going up excessively, and you have oceans which to great extent sustains diversity, sustains human life by producing fresh oxygen, by absorbing about 25% of carbon dioxide emitted from fossil fuels. The oceans also provide us fish. It regulates the climate. It regulates the environment, actually. It provided so many other services to society, including some of the proprietary information that, like the ones that have been highlighted by the previous presenter. The sea has so many things. What we know on the land is minuscule compared to what is in the sea, which we don't fully understand. We don't even have 5% of the understanding of the content of the sea, despite the advances of the modern science, chemistry, biology, and so forth. And when the ocean is affected, its properties, biogeochemical properties and physical properties are affected. So the ocean loses that ability to absorb additional carbon dioxide. And that is very dangerous to the entire human race, you know. So it means that warming will continue, and as you know, the ocean also distributes the heat on the Earth system between the two hemispheres. So the ocean waters move from the south to the north, and when when the southern parts meet the northern part, we have heat exchange. You also have exchange of materials. So these are substances, dissolved substances. That's how the ocean distributes the heat on the Earth system. And when these properties are affected, so that potential, that ability is also diminished. And as a consequence, you have warming, increased warming, you have increased extremes, you have storms, etc. And these result in disasters, including flood and so forth. And all this makes the growth, the economic growth itself, extremely, very vulnerable to this, and unsustainable actually, because it fails to produce sufficient technological means and innovations to address those concerns. So, sorry. So, and these are global issues. They were not, I mean, all countries are exposed to them, but it appears that African countries, African and other developing countries are very vulnerable to these risks because of lack of sufficient means of addressing them, of adapting or building resilience or mitigating such risks. And Africa is one of the top, the most vulnerable. And there is now a consensus globally among policymakers that model of economic development based mainly on unsustainable industrialization must be changed, must be modified. So we need to follow other pathways, mainly, as you know, sustainable development pathways. So the question is this, but before I ask the question, let me quickly summarize this. What is happening in Africa, the issues in Africa. So Africa is not yet industrialized, but Africa has a desire, has plans to industrialize. Because Africa has been growing, has been experiencing an economic growth, but that economic growth is small, it's rapid, but it does not lead to structural transformation. It does not close the poverty gap. It does not eradicate poverty. The growth of Africa is mainly contributed to by agriculture and services. You'll find GDP is more than 20%, more than 25%. So that is huge. It is also contributed to certain extent in several countries that have that are rich in natural resources. So it's also contributed to some extent by natural resources, but which have little value added. So which have limited knowledge or technological or intellectual property content. And unfortunately, to those products, to those exports, are associated low prices, marginal. So the benefit, the profit you get on those exports is relatively smaller compared to technology intensive or knowledge intensive, which are called high-tech product and services. So that's the situation in Africa, but Africa needs to industrialize. It has not yet industrialized. Even those countries that have been trying, they are generally referred to as latecomers. So now the question which I would like to pose to you, so is given those vast natural resources endowment that Africa possesses, and the need to lift the large population of Africans out of the poverty, the need to build modern infrastructure, the need to address the issue, I mean, the diseases, the increased diseases like COVID and so forth, lack of sufficient resource, financial resources, the need to build endogenous capabilities. So this is a term used, preferred by economists, that meaning just local capabilities, in short. So the question is, which development path should Africa follow? What should African countries do to move to the sustainable development pathway? Should Africa avoid industrialization? Because industrialization has caused all the harms that we have been talking about the past 3 days: climate change, disasters, and its impact on tourism, on indigenous knowledge, on growth itself, on ecosystems, etc. What should Africans do? Should they avoid emitting emissions and increase, exacerbate these effects? Or should Africa just industrialize like its sisters or counterparts or other countries, developed countries? What should Africa do? So this is a question I would like to pose to you. If you could take, please, 5 minutes if you could reflect, you can share your ideas on how should Africa move forward. And especially given these restrictions that are being made on greenhouse emissions, we have to stop now. We are hearing this. Even our African head of state are pushing for that. What should African countries do? Thank you. Just 5 minutes, your thought. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luis, for your presentation and your questions. And already I have a question for you. Go ahead, Ahmed Sabalil. Raise your hand.
حسن، جاوب قصدي؟ جاوب على السؤال؟
يس أحمد. أيوة اسأل على طول. أيوة.
يعني جريت تبع أجرامات أوسط وشمال أفريقيا حول. أنا صوتي واضح؟
صوت مش واضح يا أحمد،
سامعني
من
كويس؟
فضلك اسأل على طول أو اكتب
اسمعني.
سؤالك
أنا كمان
واقفل
بسمع.
سؤالك.
اوكي، انا الاجابه على سؤال مستر لويس بقول ان احنا يعني انا كنت شاركت في بحث دولي في منطقه الشرق الاوسط وشمال افريقيا. البحث بيدور حول ما هي متطلبات افريقيا او تاريخ المشاركه العربيه والافريقيه في مؤتمر الكوب او مؤتمرات الكوب السابقه. وفي الاخر اصدرنا مجموعه من التوصيات او المتحدثين في البحث يعني او المقابلات الانترفيو اللي عملناها مع المشاركين جميعهم اوصوا ان اذا كنا في افريقيا او في منطقه الشرق الاوسط نريد خطوات جديده واستباقيه وغير معهوده، علينا اولا توحيد الجهود. اول حاجه نعملها توحيد الجهود في وفي عمليات التنميه. تاني حاجه هي ما نشتغلش بجهد منعزل عن بعض. ما ندورش، يعني الموضوع لا يحتمل المنافسه، الموضوع مش المنافسه بقدر ما انه تكامل في الرؤى وفي الخطط التنمويه، وانها تكون منافسه على ارض الواقع. الحاجه الاخيره والمهمه جدا هي بناء والدول المحليه، بحيث ان بناء القدرات ده هو اهم ما يميز الدعم المقدم من الدول الناميه. وكمان في جزء مهم جدا في بناء القدرات وهو او الكاباسيتي بيلدينج للدول ان
of the capacity building provided to developing countries which to be not to be just dictated from outside, because each indigenous people and each country knows its own specificity, so it should be stemming from within. Each country knows its own gaps, so I do hope that this would be a part and parcel of the answer that you are seeking to have, Mr. Luis.
He is the Program Management Officer of the Trade Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development branch of UNICTAD. And she has been working with UNICTAD since 2016, specializing in areas of biodiversity, voluntary sustainability standards, non-tariff measures, and sustainable development. And she has over 15 years experience in working in diverse sectors, including international trade, investment, banking, humanitarian, and education sectors. So she will give us this morning. We will begin with you. Yes, Lika, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. Good morning, everyone from Geneva. My name is Lika, and I'm from the Biotrade initiative at UNTAD. I'm going to load my slides right now. Hold on. Is it okay if I'm able to share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Okay, so share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, great. So to the interpreters, first of all, thank you so much in advance for your help today. I cannot see you nor see the chat during my presentation. So if I'm going too fast, just please feel free to interrupt and I can go slower. Thank you so much. So as Rasha mentioned in the beginning, since this session is titled Nature, Green Economy and Innovation, today I would like to center around the topic of trade. Trade is often seen as having a very negative impact on biodiversity, as well as on ecosystems and on climate change. If you recall back in 2019, we were all shocked to see the news coverage when the report came out from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or better known as EBIS, that 1 million animal and plant species are at risk of extinction, many of them within decades. The same report also identified that the global economy has grown nearly fourfold and global trade has grown tenfold due to unsustainable levels of production and consumption of products and services derived from biodiversity. And they labeled this as one of the indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. So this sounds pretty serious. So what do we do now to stop this biodiversity loss? Do we stop global trade? Do we stop producing goods derived from biodiversity? Do we stop consuming altogether? But the simple matter of the fact is that we simply cannot. We cannot live without consuming, trading, or using biodiversity completely, at least not with the technology that we currently have. Biodiversity-based goods and services are essential in every corner of our daily lives, from the food that we eat to the cosmetics and medication that we use every day. And to go even further, biodiversity also plays an important role in our culture, in our religion, spirituality, and well-being. Economically speaking, half the world's GDP comes from the direct use of biodiversity, and today 4 billion people directly depend on biodiversity for their livelihoods and their main sources of income. So needless to say, biodiversity is all around us, and you can say it's the engine that keeps the world and our society running. The problem is the overdrive of business activities and consumer demand, which is resulting in the degradation of nature and ecosystems that is advancing at a very alarming rate. And that's what's putting biodiversity as well as our entire society at risk. So we cannot continue business as usual. We need a transformative shift, and we need a model in which biodiversity-based goods and services are produced and consumed in a sustainable way that safeguards biodiversity, but also at the same time can support livelihoods. And this is exactly what I want us to focus and discuss about in my presentation today. I would like us to look at why this shift is so important. I also would like to give you an introduction in the area that I work in called Biotrade, and how this concept and our guidelines have been applied to governments, businesses, and organizations to not only become biodiversity friendly, but also helping to maintain economic and investment activities at a sustainable level. And to see how this concept is actually applied in real life, I'm going to also share some case studies from our partners on the ground. And finally, I would like to give some recommendations and observations on what we can all do to advance to a more greener and innovative economy and society without sacrificing our biodiversity. So before I get into all the details, I just want to give you a brief explanation of where I work, UNCTAD, which is the United Nations on Trade and Development. We are the UN agency based in Geneva, Switzerland, that focuses on the interface of trade and development. Environment and biodiversity are key issues within UNCTAD because, as I've mentioned, biodiversity plays a huge role in our economy as well as in trade. But with biodiversity loss becoming a critical global issue for the economy and global trade to continue to benefit everyone, biodiversity needs to be used and consumed sustainably. So based on this need, UNCTAD coined the term Biotrade, so bio for biodiversity, and trade for sustainable trade. And with this, the Biotrade initiative was launched in 1996 to promote this concept of biotrade. And this year actually marks our 25th anniversary. So we've been around for quite some time. So what exactly then is biotrade? Biotrade is the commercialization of goods and services derived from biodiversity that adhere to a set of sustainability guidelines, which are called the Biotrade principles and criteria. There are seven principles in the Biotrade principles and criteria, which are conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of biodiversity, fair and equitable sharing of benefits, socio-economic sustainability, legal compliance, respect for the rights of actors, and clarity on the right to use and access to natural resources. Then under each principle, there are criteria to fulfill them. Which you can see in the complete text using the QR code that you see on the screen right here. They're available in English, French, and Spanish. Just to note that these principles and criteria are guidelines. They're not a standard or a certification scheme. So they're publicly accessible to anyone, and it's flexible to be adapted by everyone. The principles and criteria have been the core foundation of all our activities. We've been working with trade promotion agencies, ministries of environment, and NGOs who use these principles and criteria to develop guidelines, strategies, and tools for biodiversity conservation. We also work to engage with the private sector to raise awareness on how conserving biodiversity can actually be beneficial to them. Biotrade is currently implemented and applied across many sectors, including the food sector, personal care sector, cosmetics, phytopharma, which is medicine based on plants, tourism, fashion, etc. Biotrade related products and value chains include, for example, natural oils, like from Rula or Baobab from Zambia, Namibia, or Mozambique, jujube dates and tamarind syrups from Myanmar, herbal tea, cinnamon, ginger from Vietnam, quinoa from Peru, bird watching from Ecuador, and so on. So, as you can see, we work in a wide range of areas in collaboration with our partners and our companies. We currently work in over 80 countries through our partners on the ground, and our annual global sale of Biotrade related products exceeded over $6 billion US dollars in 2019. I'll talk a little bit more about how our partners work on the ground and some of our case studies later in my presentation. I think the principles and criteria will make more sense to you once I get into the case studies. But now let's take a step back. I would like us to bring our focus back on why it's important to talk about trade when we talk about biodiversity conservation. As I mentioned, we cannot continue business as usual. We need a new model which biodiversity-based goods and services are produced and consumed in a sustainable way that promotes biodiversity conservation, but at the same time protect the livelihoods of local communities who are dependent on biodiversity. And frankly, all of us are dependent on biodiversity one way or the other. So why is this shift so important? Our global economy is shaped by global patterns of consumption and production, which is very much driven by trade. But trade is indispensable in our society. So rather than thinking of ways to get rid of trade, we need to rethink about the way we do trade, so that trade is part of the solution to safeguard biodiversity rather than being the culprit of biodiversity loss. And while there's been a lot of talk about the negative effects of trade, it's also important to highlight that trade can also play a positive role. And this is exactly where we need to focus on. In the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, trade is recognized in the document as playing a crucial part in the Sustainable Development Goals, in the sense that trade is recognized as a vital engine for inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction. And it specifically emphasized that economic development must go hand in hand with social development and environmental protection. But this will not be possible if the current trend of biodiversity loss continues. So by shifting and reorienting to sustainable trade, it also changes the consumption and production patterns in society in the long term, which also could ultimately lead to biodiversity conservation. I know this shift is obviously not going to be easy, but it has a lot of benefits and incentives. So looking at businesses, for example, shifting to more sustainably sourced products or services will give businesses a competitive edge, because our global society is becoming more sustainably, biodiversity, and environmentally conscious. According to a consumer report published by the Union for Ethical Biotrade, which is one of our partners, in their biodiversity barometer report in 2020, 77% of surveyed consumers from 16 different countries said they felt good when buying products from companies that respect biodiversity. Also, by making this shift, it'll help businesses become more resilient, because sustainable production can help build a more sustainable and durable supply chain. And this is especially important to consider now during the pandemic, when supply chains have gotten really, really vulnerable. And speaking of the pandemic, COVID-19 proof that zoonotic diseases are on the rise due to biodiversity loss. And this will be detrimental to businesses should there be another global pandemic and a global shutdown. So businesses should be making every effort to mitigate these risks. I think it's needless to say that since the pandemic, more of us consumers, have become more health conscious. Some of us are turning to holistic care, organic food, quote unquote, natural and chemical free products. So as consumers, we are now becoming more conscious of what we eat and what we put on our body. As consumers, we're also becoming more interested and wanting to understand where the ingredients of our brands and products are coming from. Not only that, but we also want to know how they're sourced and if it's done in an ethical and sustainable way. So having this knowledge allows us to make better choices and decisions as consumers. And for countries or for governments, pushing for more sustainable production and consumption initiatives can lead to becoming more resource efficient and diminish overexploitation. Focusing on sectors based on biodiversity can provide more opportunities to diversify the economies, which will create more green jobs, increase income, and also reduce poverty. And talking about increasing income, it can create wealth and economic security and stability in communities that are rich in biodiversity and depend on it for their livelihoods. So, so far we've looked at how sustainable trade can play an important role for biodiversity conservation and how promoting sustainable production and consumption is also very important. But how can this be done realistically? So I would like to take this moment to share some case studies on what we have seen so far from the works of our partners. So in my first case, I would like to illustrate how adding economic value to biodiversity can provide incentives for conservation. And the first case is from Brazil. So ucuba is a fruit, as you can see in the slide here, from the ucubeira tree, which grows in the Amazon region in Brazil. But because so many of these trees were cut down and exported, it became listed as an endangered species in 1992. However, it continued to be illegally logged and cut down in local communities because they didn't have any other income to support themselves other than cutting the trees. Natura Cosmetics is one of the world's biggest Brazilian personal care and cosmetics company. And through research, they found that the seed of this fruit contains butter, which can be transformed into beauty products like body creams and soaps, as you see here in the slide. These products were commercialized by Natura, and a benefit sharing contract was signed with the local communities. This means that for every ucuba product that Natura sells, a percentage of the profit goes to these communities. These people who harvest the fruit will also receive an income. As a result, it resulted in the conservation of an area of over 60,000 hectares in the rainforest and saving over 5,000 trees annually. And it now brings an income to over 1,000 families in the community. So these communities are no longer cutting down the trees because they now realize that by harvesting the fruits, they can earn 3 times more than cutting down the tree. So as a result, it stopped the trends of deforestation and habitat loss in the area. In another example, Saleh Shea Sung is a small business in northern Myanmar that produces health supplements from fruits, from local fruits like jujube dates to make syrups or vitamin juices. These dates are known for its medicinal properties, but the tree is really important to the local ecosystem because they have important soil improvement and water retention properties. And through sustainably cultivating this fruit, the company has been helping to restore essential ecosystem functions in the region. The company has also been working with one of our partners, Helveticus, which is a Swiss development organization, through their regional Biotrade project. And through this project, they've incorporated our Biotrade principles and criteria, including traceability requirements of their harvests, reporting environmental sustainability measures, and having safety protocols for their workers. So when the pandemic hit last year, many companies in Myanmar, they're forced to shut down by the government because they didn't meet the safety and sanitary measures. But Saleh Shea Sung already had these protocols and measures in place before the pandemic because of the guidelines. So they were able to quickly adapt and implement them. And as a result, they never closed down their business, and they still remain open today. And in fact, the demands for the company's products increased due to rising popularity of immunity-boosting health foods. So this shows that businesses adopting biodiversity-friendly guidelines can help make businesses become more resilient and it can help build more sustainable and durable. And in my last case, this is from the Southern African. When we talk about sustainable production, it doesn't only mean in terms of preventing environmental degradation, but it also means to give back to the local community. The Udafano Women's Cooperative was established about 20 years ago in Namibia with a mission to promote and commercialize indigenous plants in a way that's not overexploited. The company extracts ingredients of indigenous plants for the cosmetic sector. So for example, they harvest and extract 12 tons of oil per year from the marula fruit, which is sold to global companies like The Body Shop. The cooperative harvests inline using our Biotech principles and criteria, which allows the plants to not be over-harvested and also respect the rights of all actors. The cooperative also invests back in the local community, such as running schools for the children. Currently, about 2,500 women are working in these cooperatives, and in 2020, the sales from marula oil jumped by 14% from the previous year, and they made a profit of approximately $15 million US. So I've walked you through looking at how trade can play a positive role in biodiversity if it's done sustainably and responsibly. But there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. So what can we do as a society as a whole so that we can advance on having a greener and innovative economy while conserving biodiversity? And for this, I have 4 recommendations. One is that stakeholders need to stop working in silos. Governments, academics, NGOs, companies, environmental activists, we all need to work together on how to reform biodiversity policies and laws, not only within the environmental circle, but also working with other sectors, including health, finance, and also agriculture. The second point is that we need more engagement of businesses in the current global negotiation process under the Convention on Biological Diversity, or the CBD. So if you follow the ongoing negotiation process of this convention, you know that this first part of the high-level talks of the COP15 for the CBD just concluded in China. And the in-person negotiations and the finalization of the new biodiversity targets will be done in May of 2022. And for this, businesses need to play an active role within this process by fostering and developing solutions and good practices together with the parties. And we already see this engagement happening with several coalitions and initiatives working together for the CBD. And they're working on a set of commitments for the upcoming COP15 in May. And my hope is that they'll be ambitious and that they'll be achievable. My third point is that we need to make more use of standards and guidelines for trade and biodiversity. Standards and guidelines can help mainstream biodiversity across various sectors and can also be useful to achieve long-term goals because standards can guide companies, governments, and organizations, just as our Biotech principles and criteria have been doing. And the last point is that we need to make more use of innovative tools that can help measure and manage biodiversity. What makes managing biodiversity so difficult, as opposed to climate change, is that we don't have one concrete system or a formula to measure biodiversity loss. This, I think it's really crucial because what's not measured cannot be managed. Nevertheless, there's a lot of tools out there that measure different aspects of biodiversity. And I just wanted to highlight 2 of our tools that we've been developing at UNCTAD, which I invite all of you listening today to check out as well. So the first tool is the biodiversity statistics tool. The trade and biodiversity statistics tool, which our team and our UNCTAD statistics branch has been developing. It can provide trade flows of biodiversity-based products, and it will contain data on a number of economic indicators of biodiversity-based products across the globe. The tool is scheduled to be launched later this year, so I cannot say much more details at this time. So, but please stay tuned, and we'll have a launching event for that. Another tool is the self-assessment tool, which was created in collaboration with the International Trade Center, and this was launched in 2020. And what's great about this tool is that you can evaluate your company or organization by answering a series of questions to see how much of your business is compliant against the Biotrade guidelines. So it's kind of an online test that you can take, similar to kind of the online tests we've been taking last year, like do you have COVID or not? Do you qualify for aid? Those kinds of online assessments. Taking this test doesn't earn you an official label or a certificate for Biotrade, but the goal of this tool is to give you a preliminary diagnostic report to see where your company or value chain stands against the Biotrade guidelines and how you can improve. And I encourage you all to try it from the website you see here. You don't have to be necessarily a company owner to do this. So these tools are all free and they're publicly accessible. So anyone is free to use it. So in conclusion, making the shift so that global trade of biodiversity-based goods and services to become more sustainable will take collective efforts and significant global commitment. And this will take a lot of work. But at the same time, it will be a lose-lose situation for everyone if the current practices of unsustainable consumption and production continue to happen. And for biodiversity and society to prosper together in the long term, a resilient and an innovative system is really needed. So thank you so much for your attention until now. I know it's been a long presentation. I look forward to any questions you may have and to our discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lika, for this precious intervention and presentation. I have a question, please. Do you, with this initiative of Biotrade, do you cooperate with governments or directly or with private sector or individuals? When you give examples of Brazil, Myanmar, Namibia, this is individuals who works in these products or government?
In the case of Namibia, it's the cooperative. So we are in direct talks with the cooperative, and we give them. We've given the advice on how and training on how to implement the principles and criteria, but we also work with governments as well. So, for example, we work a lot with Peru, with the government of Peru, especially with the Ministry of Environment. We also work with their trade promotion agency as well. We work with the Ministry of Environment in Colombia, and in these governments, we help them adopt the principles and criteria into their government policies. So there is now a policy on Biotrade in Peru, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen any of North Africa countries.
Yes, North Africa, we still haven't, we're still trying to move on the discussions. We've been talking with Morocco, for example, with the company Morocco for argan oil, but a lot of our work has been primarily for the moment in the southern part of Africa. But we're all open to working with Northern Africa as well.
I think I have questions, 2 questions, I think, on the chat. Okay, I will tell it in Arabic, and then the translators, the interpreters will do this translation. هل يمكن أن يحقق الاقتصاد الأخضر التنمية الاقتصادية
How can the green economy achieve development and elevate the poverty that Africa has been struggling from? So are there any challenges that will hinder the green economy?
هل يمكن أن يحقق الاقتصاد الأخضر التنمية
So
الاقتصادية؟
can the green economy achieve economic development and elevate poverty, so to help the African countries to stop struggling from poverty? So are there any challenges that will face the green economy?
This question from Ahmed.
Yes, that's very right. Yes, that's very true. And especially with the COVID, Africa has been hit very hard in terms of economy, and green economy can be a way to help elevate the economies. The question was what are the challenges facing green economy? Is that correct?
Yes, yes. What about the challenges that will face the green economy?
Yes, exactly. So the challenges is that, as I mentioned, it's that we need to work both with governments and the companies together. We cannot really, to have a green economy, we cannot really have just the governments working or just the companies working towards that. We need both of them to work towards it together. So we need a common goal, and we need some common a framework to work together on it. I think that's been really the challenge, because different companies and governments, they have different goals, they have different aims, but we need to have a common framework that we can work towards together. I think that's the biggest challenge that I've seen so far.
Another question from China.
Another. Can you give us some examples about the impact of trade on environment, and have this been taken into consideration, or how can we take this into consideration without impacting trade in Africa or Egypt?
Okay, so the question is examples of trade, the impact of trade on environment.
Yeah. Yes, this is the first part of the question.
Okay, impact of trade. Impact of trade.
The impact of trade on environment, and how can we take this into consideration without impacting the trade in Africa or Egypt?
Okay, yes. So the impact of trade. So as it was mentioned in the EBIS report, there's been it's the volume of trade, right? So the volume of trade has increased tenfold in the last few decades, and that has been impact on in many ways. So it could be the impact of CO2 when transporting goods from one place to another. It's the transportation costs and the environmental degradation caused by the transportation between goods. But it's primarily the way that we produce and consume products. It's been just done in a way that's been incomparable in the past. We just consume so much and produce so much, and in a way that's not sustainable, and that's been one of the biggest impacts that's been causing this biodiversity, this loss. And what was the second question? I'm really sorry.
How the impact of trade on environment can be considered in Africa and Egypt. So that's yes, this is the second part of the question.
How can it be taken? Okay, I think in terms of Africa, from what I've seen so far, it's sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? It's a little bit confusing to me. Can you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
It's okay. How can we take into consideration the impact of trade on environment without negatively impacting the trade in Africa and Egypt?
Okay. Yes. So one thing I can say that's in the works right now is the AFCFTA, which is the African Free Trade Agreement, and this is kind of the I'm sure you might be aware of this already, but it's the trade agreement between different African countries that can trade freely and give more. That can trade freely between the countries without with less documents and with less hassle. And I think I think this is a very good thing. It's moving trade in a good direction within the African region. But I think the problem is that there's no chapter in the sense that there's no chapter on environmental of consideration or what the impact is on biodiversity. So I think this needs to be negotiated better between the countries that are being. It's currently still being negotiated, and we're trying to push for the AU, the African Union, to put in a chapter on environmental effects and the effects that it might have. And I think that by putting this in, I think that this could mitigate the negative effects of trade within the African region. I'm not sure if I answered your question wholly, but this is what I see from my works right now.
It's okay. Thank you so much. We have another question from Dina. Dina, please ask your question.
تمام الصوت واضح
Dina.
كنت قلتي ان 77%
You said that 77% of the consumers are happy because of having products that respect biodiversity. So is there any Arab country or those consumers, do we have some of them from the Arab countries? Because whenever we buy organic products, the prices are doubled. So the people with the medium income, they cannot buy organic products. But in case international organizations will make all products chemical free and environment and eco-friendly, I think all the products will have reasonable prices. So did you take any procedure in this regard? This is the first point. The second point, I heard a lot about green jobs term, but till now I don't understand what does it mean. So can you tell me more or give me some examples about green jobs so that I can get an idea about this topic?
Thank you, Dina.
Yeah, Dina, for your question. So the first part of your question, so the 77%. So the survey was done in 16 countries. Sorry, I cannot check right now if there was from the Arab country, of one from Arab country, but I'm very sure that it came from 5 continents. So there are the African region was also was one of the 16 countries that was surveyed. And you're very right in the sense of the of organic foods. It's twice or even 3 times expensive usually. And what was your question in terms of organic foods and the higher
No, organic products in general, not organic food. Even cosmetics or any other organic products, usually their prices are much higher compared to the regular products.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the question
so
was?
if all the international organizations make sure that the products are eco-friendly and chemical free, this will make the organic products or most of the products will be reasonable for everyone, and there will be no difference between the regular products and the organic products. So how can we do that? Or is it available? Can we do that already or not?
It's going to be a long process, and I don't think we can do it very quickly. I think making organic products, of course, is very products is of course very expensive. It takes more work. It takes certifications to do. It takes more manpower to do as well. It's a slow progress, and I don't think, to be honest, I don't think it can be done 100%, but the important is to aim towards it. I think organic foods necessarily don't mean that it's sustainable. I think the importance that is we produce and consume products in a way that's more sustainable. So whether it be organic or natural, I think that we need to always, what we always tell companies is that, we don't have to be certified. You don't necessarily have to be organic. That's not the only way, but to always consider what alternatives there are to produce a product. Can you make it more sustainable? Can you cut down on the amount of chemicals that you're using? Can you do a research or analysis on how you can prevent from over harvesting. I think this is kind of the first steps that you need to take. I think taking those little steps, I think is the most important. And to answer your second question, this was on green jobs, and your question was on what are some examples of green jobs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Green jobs is basically it's a very, I know it's a very big term. You can use it for anything. You can make it. The very vague definition is that any job that's more sustainable can be called a green job. In Biotech, we don't really have a definite definition of what is a green job, quote unquote, and what is not. But what we always say, and I've said this in my previous question, is that we always ask companies, we always discuss with governments on how to make it not necessarily green, but greener. So to move it in a direction that's more sustainable, more greener, more sustainable. Not, you know, you cannot go from 0 to 100%. But for example, for greener jobs, you know, do you consider the protection does the job entitle thinking about the environment, the ecosystem, the environmental impacts that you have on the job? Do you consider, is the job considered to take into account for example, the ecological footprint or the CO2 footprint? So I think that will be considered a greener job, but I think the term green job is quite big, I think, and it's very broad. So.
Thank you so much. We have another question on the chat from Hadir. فيما يخص تمويل مشروعات.
In terms of financing the biodiversity projects, are there certain sectors that you concentrate financing on them? In terms of financing the sustainable and biodiversity projects, are there certain sectors that you focus on? You focus the finance on? Is it clear?
Yes, that's very great. Thank you so much. There's a little bit of glitch. That's why I keep on asking. But thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you, Hadir, for your question. In terms of financing biodiversity, we have different ways of going about financing. Sorry, and just to ask another question. So this is in terms of financing biodiversity projects or green or in general.
No. The sustainable projects and biodiversity projects.
Biodiversity. Okay. So biodiversity projects in general.
Yes.
Okay. So biodiversity projects in general, there's a various number of sectors that are involved now. There's actually a lot of different funds of banks that are also involved now in funding biodiversity-based projects. I think the one that's especially quite active is the one on biodiversity investing on kind of, for example, like real estate. There's also ones for food sectors. There's also ones for startups as well, to create innovative startups as well. So it's becoming really, really diverse, and it's becoming more and more sectors are participating in it. There's also government funded finance projects as well that help with these different projects of biodiversity as well. So it's becoming really diversified, and I'm looking forward that this trend will continue to increase in the coming years.
Thank you, Lika. We have another question from Ihab Zidan. Please ask your question, Ihab.
صباح الخير. أنا
Good
كنت عاوز
morning.
دلوقتي بدأ يتنامى حوالين العالم
Now
الاقتصاد الأخضر.
we hear more about the green economy. This concept is rising. But after some readings, I found, at least in the Arab region, that it is just a publicity, propaganda, but they do not want to achieve actual sustainable development. And even when they do it right, the executive parties, they are not complying with this. So the green economy concept has been applied in other countries and proved that it's successful. This is the first question. The second question, if there is a country who is successful in green economy, so how much of the green economy now comprises their GDP, the percentage of the green economy in the country GDP? Is it clear, Lika?
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you, Habs, for your question. So the first part on green economy, yes, you're very right. It's very, we call it greenwashing. And it's not only in the Arab region, I think it's global. It's a very loosely used term, and people kind of use it for promotion and marketing practices, and it's not actually, they're not actually really implementing any environmental or greener initiatives. And this is even true for the bigger multinational global companies as well. So I think this is a really big issue, and I think at the one we're trying to really promote that we need to really verify and also to implement measures that need to diminish this green market and green promotional kind of schemes. And I think that I think what's needed is that we need to really work with the governments and also with the companies. We also need to work with organizations to make sure and to verify and to point out and to point fingers to say, okay, this is greenwashing. I think it's very good that we recognize the concept of greenwashing, and that we that we can point fingers and say, okay, this is not real. This is not real greener initiative. It's just greenwashing. So I think we need to do more of this. We need to raise awareness on this. We also need to work with governments and also with companies to really, to really address this issue and to say that this is really not working towards a greener economy. This is just marketing. So I think that's really important. To your second question on the country, to be honest, I don't know the exact percentage of the GDP, and it depends on the company as well. One example that I can give that's been successful in trying to implement the green economy is Peru. And what they've done is that they have this commission. They call it I cannot remember the exact name, but it's called the Commission on Biotrade and Green Economy, something like this. And it's a platform where governments, academics, I think trade promotion agencies, also NGOs, they can all, it's a platform where they can all work together and collaborate together on different issues. So they have events, they have meetings, they have forums. I think they used to have trade shows before the pandemic. And one of the successful ones was the collaboration between the Ministry of Environment and the Trade Promotion Agency of Peru. And they formed this initiative together, and they created this, what is it called? The Biotrade, I forgot the name, but it's called the Biotrade Promotion Scheme. And so they would, so the ministry would help fund or aid or give trainings to small and medium enterprises who are working with Biotrade products. So biodiversity based products. So for example, quinoa, or working with textiles or with food sectors. And the Trade Promotion Agency will help export these products to all over the world. And I think they've increased their sales by, I think 300%, I think. So it's been quite successful. So I think this collaboration between different sectors, I think, will be crucial for a successful kind of a greener economy in the future.
Thank you so much, Lika. Thank you for your presentation and your answers, and hope to see you in another workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.